2019, a US Navy F/A-18 Super Hornet suffered a catastrophic engine failure at 40,000 feet. The aircraft entered an uncontrolled flat spin at speeds exceeding 400 miles per hour. The G-forces crushing the pilot into his seat were so violent that most humans would have lost consciousness within seconds. And an unconscious pilot in a flat-spinning jet at 40,000 feet is not a pilot anymore. He is a passenger on a one-way trip into the ground. The aircraft was unrecoverable. The situation, by every conventional measure of aviation survival mathematics, was unsurvivable. The pilot walked away. Not because he was lucky, not because the aircraft somehow corrected itself, because strapped to his body, packed into every layer of his flight equipment from his boots to the top of his helmet, was a collection of technology so sophisticated, so precisely engineered for exactly this kind of unsurvivable moment, that it essentially kept a human being functional and alive through conditions that would kill an unprotected person in seconds. The suit kept his blood from pooling in his legs. The helmet kept his neck from snapping under the G-load. The ejection system read the aircraft's attitude and fired at the precise millisecond that gave him the maximum survival window. And when he hit the air outside that spinning cockpit, the parachute system deployed in a sequence so automated and so intelligent that it required almost nothing from a pilot who was already at the edge of consciousness. The total cost of the equipment keeping that pilot alive? Just under $3 million for one person, one set of gear, one pilot's life. And here is the thing that makes that number not just acceptable, but genuinely reasonable to every military planner who has ever signed off on the procurement budget. Training a single US Navy carrier-qualified fighter pilot from scratch takes between 8 and 10 years and costs the American taxpayer approximately $10 million before that pilot ever sits in a combat cockpit for the first time. The $3 million suit protecting him is not an extravagance. It is the cheapest possible insurance policy on a $10 million human investment that took a decade to build. But here is what almost nobody outside the military aviation community actually knows. The $3 million price tag is just the beginning of this story, because what that money actually buys, the layers of technology packed into every square inch of a modern fighter pilot's flight equipment, is one of the most extraordinary engineering achievements in human history. Systems that have been quietly evolving for 70 years, absorbing lessons from every crash, every ejection, every unsurvivable situation that somehow produced a survivor, until the equipment that today's US pilots strap on before climbing into a cockpit is less a flight suit and more a wearable life support system that exists for one single purpose: making sure that no matter what happens to the aircraft, the human being inside it comes home. That is the story we are telling today. And by the time this video is over, you will never look at a fighter pilot the same way again. To understand what $3 million actually buys, you have to understand what a fighter pilot's body goes through in a modern combat aircraft, because the human body was simply not designed for this environment. And every piece of equipment in the $3 million package exists to compensate for a specific biological vulnerability that the cockpit would otherwise exploit lethally. Start with G-force. When an F-22 or F/A-18 pulls a hard turn at combat speeds, the pilot inside experiences gravitational forces that can reach 9G, 9 times the force of normal gravity. At 9G, the human body weighs 9 times its normal weight. A 180-pound pilot suddenly weighs 1,620 pounds. The blood that normally circulates freely through the entire body gets forced violently downward by that crushing force, draining from the brain toward the legs with a speed and completeness that causes G-induced loss of consciousness (GLOC) within as little as 3 to 5 seconds of sustained high G exposure. A pilot who loses consciousness at 9G in the middle of a combat maneuver does not wake up in time to recover the aircraft, ever. The solution is the anti-G suit, and it is one of the most elegant pieces of engineering in the entire $3 million package. Fitted tightly around the pilot's abdomen, thighs, and calves, the anti-G suit is connected directly to the aircraft's pneumatic system. The moment the aircraft's sensors detect a high G maneuver beginning, the suit inflates automatically, squeezing the pilot's lower body with precisely calibrated pressure that forces blood back upward toward the brain, counteracting the gravitational drain that would otherwise cause unconsciousness. The pilot simultaneously performs a specific muscle-tensing breathing technique, the anti-G straining maneuver, that works in concert with the suit to extend G tolerance from the unprotected baseline of around 4 to 5G to a sustainable 8 to 9G. Without this system, modern fighter combat as it is currently practiced would be physiologically impossible for human pilots. But G-force is only one of the environments trying to kill the pilot. At altitude, the cockpit environment becomes lethal in a completely different way. At 40,000 feet, the atmospheric pressure is so low that unprotected human tissue would literally begin to bubble, a condition called embolism, where dissolved gases in the blood and tissues expand as pressure drops, causing catastrophic internal damage within minutes. The pilot's pressure suit and oxygen system work together to maintain a breathable, pressurized microenvironment around his body, regardless of what is happening outside the aircraft. If the cockpit depressurizes catastrophically, if a canopy fails, if the aircraft is hit and structural integrity is compromised, the suit becomes the pilot's personal atmosphere, maintaining the pressure and oxygen supply his body needs to stay conscious and functional while he either recovers the aircraft or initiates ejection. Then there is the helmet. And the helmet is where the $3 million story gets genuinely spectacular. The helmet worn by F-35 pilots, the Joint Helmet-Mounted Cueing System, which has evolved into the Generation 3 helmet, costs $400,000 on its own. $400,000 for a single helmet. And when you understand what it does, that price stops seeming unreasonable and starts seeming like a bargain. The helmet contains a display system that projects targeting information, aircraft data, threat warnings, navigation cues, and sensor feeds directly onto the visor in front of the pilot's eyes, creating a heads-up display that moves with the pilot's head rather than being fixed to the instrument panel. The pilot can look left, look right, look straight down through the floor of the aircraft, and the display follows his gaze, giving him a 360-degree situational awareness picture that is literally impossible to achieve any other way. The helmet also integrates directly with the F-35's distributed aperture system. 6 infrared cameras mounted around the aircraft's fuselage that together create a complete spherical view of the environment surrounding the jet. When the pilot looks down through the cockpit floor, he is not looking at his own knees. He is seeing a real-time infrared image of the ground 40,000 feet below him, projected through the helmet's display system as if the aircraft's structure does not exist. Pilots who have flown with this system describe the first experience of looking through the aircraft's floor as one of the most disorienting and extraordinary sensations in aviation, a moment where the boundary between human perception and machine sensor fusion essentially disappears. And then there is the ejection system. The Martin Baker ejection seat that equips most US Navy fighters is itself a complete survival platform. Not simply a mechanism that throws the pilot out of the aircraft, but an intelligent automated system that reads the aircraft's altitude, airspeed, attitude, and sink rate in the fraction of a second between the pilot pulling the handle and the seat firing, and adjusts the ejection trajectory and parachute deployment sequence to maximize survival probability for whatever specific set of conditions exists at that exact moment. At 0 altitude and 0 airspeeds, sitting on the runway, the system can still successfully deploy a parachute and land the pilot safely. At supersonic speed at low altitude, it fires with a trajectory that gets the pilot clear of the aircraft before the air blast can cause fatal injuries. The seat has saved over 7,500 lives since its introduction. Every one of those lives was wearing a version of the equipment that is now packed into the $3 million survival package. Wearing $3 million worth of survival technology does not feel like putting on a protective supersuit. It feels like being slowly compressed, restricted, and encased in a system that demands a level of physiological and psychological adaptation that takes months to achieve and years to master. New fighter pilots describe the first time they wear the full flight equipment ensemble pressure suit, anti-G suit, survival vest, helmet, oxygen mask as genuinely claustrophobic in a way that surprises even people who thought they were mentally prepared for it. The oxygen mask that covers the lower half of the pilot's face delivers 100% pure oxygen under positive pressure during high-altitude operations, meaning that instead of breathing in naturally and exhaling with muscle effort, the mask pushes oxygen into the lungs under pressure, forcing the pilot to consciously resist the inflow and actively work to exhale. This reversal of normal breathing mechanics sounds minor until you are doing it for 4 hours in a combat environment while simultaneously managing aircraft systems, monitoring threat warnings, communicating on multiple radio frequencies, and executing tactical maneuvers at 9G. The training required to make this physiological reversal feel natural takes weeks. Some student pilots wash out not because they lack flying skill, but because their bodies simply cannot adapt to the respiratory demands of the oxygen system. The anti-G suit training is equally demanding. The AGSM, the muscle-tensing, controlled breathing technique that works with the suit to maintain cerebral blood flow during high-G maneuvers, must be performed reflexively, without conscious thought, in the middle of combat maneuvering that is itself demanding every available unit of the pilot's cognitive capacity. Pilots train this technique on centrifuge machines that spin them up to combat G-loads and hold them there while instructors monitor brain oxygenation in real time. Pilots who fail to perform the AGSM correctly lose consciousness on the centrifuge. The centrifuge is the safe version. The cockpit is not. And the helmet, for all its extraordinary capability, creates its own adaptation challenges. The Generation 3 F-35 helmet weighs approximately 5 pounds. 5 pounds does not sound significant until you consider that at 9G, that helmet weighs 45 pounds on the pilot's neck. Neck injuries from helmet weight during high-G maneuvering are a documented occupational hazard of flying modern helmet-mounted display systems, and the physical conditioning programs that U.S. fighter pilots follow specifically include neck strength training designed to handle the combined weight of helmet and G-load during sustained combat maneuvering. The suit keeps the pilot alive. The pilot has to be strong enough, disciplined enough, and trained enough to let the suit do its job. Every single component in that package, the anti-G suit, the pressure system, the $400,000 helmet, the intelligent ejection seat, the oxygen delivery architecture exists because somewhere in the history of military aviation, a pilot died for the lack of it. Every specification, every material choice, every automated system that fires without requiring human input in a crisis moment, all of it was written in the lessons of accidents, crashes, and unsurvivable situations that produced data about exactly what the human body needs to stay alive in environments it was never designed to inhabit. That history is not ancient. Fighter aviation loses pilots every year to equipment failures, to physiological limits pushed past their edge, to the cumulative toll of careers spent operating at the absolute boundary of what human bodies can sustain. Every loss adds data. Every data point improves the next generation of equipment. The $3 million suit of 2026 is better than the $2 million suit of 2016 because of what the 2016 version could not prevent. And the suit of 2036 will be better still, for reasons that are right now being written in flight data recorders and accident investigation reports that the public will never read.